During our last episode, a lot happened to us when we were out sailing. And if you haven't watched that last episode, I highly recommend you watching it so that you know all of the different things that broke. Franny was able to fix some of those things. We are continuing on with the fixes so that you can see what she did to problem solve.
Good morning. It's Saturday morning. We're starting in the engine area, and Franny will give you an update on what we're doing next.
This is the starboard rear berth, and this is where our tank is. You've got a small access here where you can turn on and off the valves, which is great, but that's not what we need. We need to pull this entire piece up. And there we go. So these are the two fuel lines out. One's for the engine and the other one is for the generator. Okay, so this is the starboard diesel valve. So this is for the engine, and this one says generator on it, so this one's for the generator. All the fuel lines have double hose clamps on them, which is kind of nice. These two lines here are return lines. So we have, let's see, on this tank we only have 4 standpipes. I think on the other tank it had 5, which is interesting, but it's got 3 returns. What we're going to be doing today is pulling this square cover off the top. It's the only access we have to the tank itself. So I've got to disconnect this and this. I've got to get this hose off of this, and then I've got to pull up all of these bolts all the way around. There's one underneath here as well. And then it's kind of funny, you have to drop this plate into the tank and then sort of hornswoggle it around until you can get it on the diagonals to come out. And once you've got it out, you can set it off to the side and you've got full access to the tank. So it's going to take a little bit of time for me to kind of pull all this stuff apart, but once we do, we'll have complete access. Now I do have the vent open here, and I also have the port light over here as well open, because diesel is, well, it's not nearly as stinky as gas, but boy, it'll give you a bad headache after a while. So
right. Oh, it gives me a migraine for sure.
Right. So you totally want to have some decent ventilation. This is Franny from the future. You may notice that it was the port side that gave us grief on our trip. This is the starboard side we're working on. So we figured since the port side was a mess, we should probably clean the starboard side as well. So the process is the same for both sides. You can't knock that into the tank. That's critical.
Right.
I have 2 more bolts to get out. There's one. Alright, there we go. So where I screwed up last time was I ripped this gasket. So I'm going to be very careful with it this time and not rip it. Okay, now the trick is to get this guy back up. It's not as easy as it looks because this thing's in the way.
Right.
So you have to just get it so,
Tetris or something.
and it will come out.
I wasn't thinking through it when you had that 1 or 2 screws on there. I'm like, you missed some. And then I was like, oh, you're smarter than the average bear.
That is exactly the reason why I did that, because I didn't want it falling in.
Right.
Well, let's take a look in here and see what we got. Do you see that right there? See that blob? That's not good. And then to the right of it, just a little bit, is a chain. Now that was the chain that was holding the gas cap on to the lead pipe up there. I'm sure that's what that was, and now it's in here. But there is some schmutz down there. This diesel fuel is really red. You really have to kind of move the light around in a weird way. So we're going to siphon that out, all that debris that's down there, and we'll go ahead and clean this. This is kind of like a manual polish. You can see all my tools are way away from where we're working. All the nuts and bolts, or all the bolts, I suppose, and the tools and everything else. The reason for that is the last thing I want to do is knock something into this hole, because then those are stainless. I can't use a magnet to pull them out. So that'd be a bummer.
Cell phones too.
Yeah.
Probably don't want that in there.
Another teeny little tidbit about this is not really super important, but these tanks on the FP, as far as I understand, they've got an aluminum top, but they're actually a poly tank. So the bottom of them isn't corroding away, which is awesome.
Right.
But,
some of the older tanks.
Yeah, but you've got this really solid aluminum top on it as well. It seems like it's the best of both worlds. I think it's pretty cool. cool, actually. They're big, 400 and something liters. I mean, they're big. So like 125 gallons or something like that. They're big tanks.
So did you buy this, or did we have this in ship stores? How did you find this?
I've had that for my car stuff.
Oh, car stuff.
Okay, so Heidi can start pumping. We'll go ahead and clean this up. See that? Let's see if we're getting it. Yeah.
So we know it's going the right direction.
Yeah, look at that. So we're cleaning this schmutz off the bottom. And this is more like debris. So it's kind of picking up the little blops of goo that are down there, but it doesn't look like it's holding together like it did on the other side. All right, great. Let's do this one over here.
Oh, you're pulling on it. Sorry. If you want me to go faster, I will.
That's fine. All right. Okay, and we've got some more to do down here.
Pull that again. Okay.
It's hard to see and get to. Okay, well, let's continue on here. What I was looking for were some of those big black blobs like we saw in the other tank. I didn't find any. I just found a bit of debris. So we went ahead and siphoned it all up, and I think it looks pretty good down here. I'll go ahead and pull this out, and we'll take a look. All right, this is our after. It looks a little bit better down there. Got a lot of that out, actually, so it looks a little cleaner. I couldn't really determine. I see what you're seeing are reflections of those standpipes. You can't really see the end of it. It's quite the optical illusion. You can kind of see as I wiggle the boat a little bit, you can see them move around. That's because you're actually looking at a reflection. You can't really see the bottom. There is some black stuff down there. It's not too bad. It's kind of stuck, so I'm not too worried about it. Like I said, what I was looking for was a big black patch. And there was one sort of area, and we sucked it up. So that's that. Okay. Good. Okay, here we go. This is always interesting. It's always a thing. I'm going to get this thing down and in there, then I have to get this gasket on top of it without ripping it, and then get some bolts in it. Boy, that gasket's all floppy and goofy. So we don't have that much gas in the tank. You know, that's a good point. You really only want to do this exercise in a very calm anchorage with probably, what, half a tank or less. Anything else, and you risk it sloshing around and going just everywhere. Well, this is actually going better than it did before, that's for sure. The other side was a big pain in the buns, and probably because I had broken the gasket, and that probably caused a massive fuss. I had to make a new gasket, and it was just a lot more difficult to work with. Okay, so let's get the rest of our bolts in. Now, as I said before, these have a nasty tendency to want to cross thread, so very important to put them all in first bit by hand. Make sure that they're going in all the way through, they're not cross-threading. Can't cross-thread by hand. And the rubber gasket just needs to kind of move into place where it needs to be. Now also, interestingly, these weren't tight at all. If they had 5 foot-pounds on them, I'd be surprised. They just were almost loose. They felt basically hand-tight. And so there might be some slossage in here, and you could get a little weepage around there and certainly get a little bit of diesel smell. So you don't want to cramp down on this. You'll deform the gasket so much that it'll actually leak, which is weird. But you do want to seat each one of these. Absolutely. And notice I am not using my electric ratchet on this. I only use the electric ratchet to remove bolts. I never use it to tighten bolts. Unless I know that they're in, it's just a super, super long run, it's just going to sit there and crank away and I don't have much room, then maybe, but I would never use it to tighten because you have to do this by hand. In the absence of a bunch of torque specs, seat everything down. Make sure this feels like it's in actually, which is great. Okay, cool. I'm going to opposite corners. I'm looking at the gasket as well down here just to make sure that it doesn't look like it's splayed out really bad and squished, because if you do, when you squish it, it'll 100% leak. So let's take a look. It looks really good. Of course, there's a little bit of wetness there. That's normal. We'll dry that off. It's just because we just installed this. Okay, it looks good. Looks really good. We can move this out of the way, right? None of this bit is, definitely don't want any of that in the tank. 2 hose clamps here. All right, Now this is a bit of a thing. I have to bend it. There we go. That wasn't that bad, huh? Shark seated all the way. Good. All right. Right on. Okay. Okay, that's one. It's right back where they were. Bolt down there. Great. At this point, I'm just going to clean everything up. That's all that's really left here. And we'll put our cover back on. We can put our bed back together. But there's still a little bit of remnants of diesel, and I probably have some on the bottom of my shoes and everything. So I'm just going to clean everything up. In order to clean, I'm using this stuff, which is just a citrus degreaser. It's biodegradable, so it's safe to use on boats, and seems to do a pretty good job. This is from Starbright. I used it on the other side. Seemed to cut through the diesel pretty well. Let me go ahead and clean all this up. And on to the next project. You remember from the last video that right at the end we tried to start the generator and it ran for a little bit, but then it pooped out, telling me that it had no raw water, which was kind of a fib actually in the end, but I thought I would start with the pump. And so what I'm doing here is just trying to recondition the old pump. I put a new impeller in it, I tried to work on it a bit, but in the end it still wasn't working. Expect to see. There it goes. I knew it would shut down eventually. Okay, so it shut down. Well, I have to go see what it says. Raw water flow. Fault number 7. Well, alright, at this point, I think the only real solution is just to replace the entire pump. I think it just must be worn out. Plate's worn out, something's worn out. The pump's just not doing it.
Good morning. It's Saturday morning and we are still working on the generator. We've ordered some parts and that is our next task for today.
Okay, so look at this brand new pump. And I've talked to a few people about this and they said, you know what, the problem is, and I think we mentioned that last week, was that the pumps just get worn out. The impeller is spinning around in there all the time and it just wears the metal out. And if there's too much of a gap, then water can scoot by that gap and it can't maintain pressure, which is what it seems like. Now, if this doesn't fix the problem, the next thing to look at is going to be the heat exchanger. It's the only thing in the way after this. So I'm hoping the heat exchanger isn't a mess. I'm hoping it's not filled full of broken impeller blades and all sorts of things that could be in there. But let's swap out this pump first. That way I know it's a known good unit. And the other one did look really corroded and kind of messed up anyway. So it wasn't crazy expensive. It's only 2 bolts. If you are going to do this, this is a Cummins Onan Generator is what it is. It's 13 point something or other kilowatt. I think they're 8, 9, 10 and on up use the same sort of pump. It's a Sherwood pump is what it is. It's a 702 pump. So it's not actually made by Cummins. They just bought this thing and plunked it on the side of their engine here. You need to get a gasket for it as well. It is in the parts list, but it doesn't come with the pump. So what I did for that was, you can find the gasket. You just kind of have to look around. It's, you know, Sherwood 702 pump gasket, and you'll find it. But, you know, I hate ordering a gasket that weighs nothing, paying 14, 15 bucks for it, and then paying twice that for shipping. So that's always a bummer. So I found this, which is, there are 2 different repair kits for this pump, a minor kit and a major kit. This is the minor kit. It comes with a new impeller. Isn't that pretty neat?
Nice thing to have in the ship's
Yeah, and then there's some seals and stuff in here, and then it also comes with a gasket for the actual pump, which is kind of a weird thing that you would do, but okay. Because you don't need to take this black bit off. You can separate the pump here with these 3 bolts here, pull the pump off, and you don't need to pull this off the engine. It's a funny thing that they would have given you the gasket, but glad they did. This was $55 part. The major kit is like $93, and I managed to not only get the gasket, which I needed, but I now have a new impeller. So I have a backup impeller, so that's pretty sweet. So let me show you real quick what we're dealing with here. So here is the pump installed. You can see it's a little bit rusted. There's our flange back there with our 2 bolts that we have to take off, and looks like fun. So this one has a nut on it, and the other one, I hope it just is a bolt threaded into something, because I don't know how I'd get behind there. But we also have a problem with the hose clamps. Not a huge problem, but you can see this one is way, way, way too big, this hose clamp here. And the reason is, when we were out at sea and I was trying to replace the impeller, I touched this clamp and it just snapped in half and broke right off. So I found this one in ship stores. I have a new clamp here, which I'm going to install that hopefully is the right size. It might be a little small, but I think it's gonna fit, kind of hoping it will. If not, I'll know to have to get a little bit bigger one. But so we gotta swap that out. Something else to notice here, down below this guy here is the fuel pump. It's an electric fuel pump on this engine, and look how corroded it is. It sits literally right below the water pump. Now, I'm gonna pick at Cummins here a little bit. Super bad place for an electric fuel pump. Now, an electric fuel pump can go anywhere. It doesn't have to be mounted here at all. It's not connected to the engine. It's not like there's a push rod that's driving it.
Their layout? I mean,
Yeah, it's a bad layout.
default layout?
Yeah, I would never put the fuel pump underneath a saltwater water pump.
That is
And lo and behold, it's pretty rusted. So it looks like it's still doing okay, and it's not really a problem in there, but that's a bad idea. And look at that connection down there. It's pretty corroded as well, that fuel line coming out of it, so that's not good. That's just a bad idea. I think that's actually bad. That's the inlet line, I think, into the pump, and this is probably the outlet on the top. It's always a good idea to poke around in here and take a look at things. Now, there is a sensor down underneath there. You can see that right there. That is our raw water sensor. I have the new pump in. It looks great in here. Let me show you what it looks like. All right, so there's our new pump. Oh, nice and shiny. It took me forever to clean the surface for that gasket. But now, this is the inlet tube here, and it's dry. If we take a look at our sea strainer here, it's filled with water. But you know what I want to do? I want to throw some water in here and prime it, because this is a completely dry pump, and I don't want it just sitting here spinning and spinning and spinning without any water in it. Just a little salt water.
It actually isn't what it says on the bottle.
No, it's just salt water. So I'm just going to fill this up a bit just to help prime the system. It's coming up. There it is. Okay, so we have that. Put my rag down here, and I'm going to put that over the fuel pump, because we certainly don't want any salt water on that. Move our hose over. There we go. There. Alright, so I've got that hose back on. So the clamp is loose. So let me go ahead and tighten down the clamp. We'll give this thing a try. Okay, I want to make sure that's good and tight. It's not moving, not twisting. Already got the top one tight. Alright. What you want to do is look on the outside of the boat here and make sure that the water is coming through.
It's dry right now.
It does have to fill up the exchangers as well.
Wait.
Dribble of water.
Wait.
Now I get some water coming through.
Oh!
Yeah, that's more like what we're looking for. But that needs to be pretty consistent. Come on, kiddo. Come on, make this proud. It needs to fill those heat exchangers up with water. You can always check.
Okay.
Here. Water is nice and clear. It looks like lots of water dumped in there, so it looks like it's doing its thing. So there's our panel. Status is running, doing its thing. It will definitely shut down if it overheats, and it looks like it's happy. Well, I think it's actually working. I'm not positive. I do want to maybe talk to some friends and see if this is exactly what it's supposed to do. If that's normal, totally normal behavior, I just want to make sure that it's doing its thing. But it is running, and it's not shutting down because it's overheating. It's not shutting down because it doesn't have any water. It's not shutting down at all. It's doing its thing. So I think I'm going to call this done for now, and we'll go back to it and I'm going to check with some people. We'll come back to it a little bit later, but I think we may have solved the generator issue. Well, it ran for a while. It certainly ran for about maybe 10, almost 15 minutes, but then look at this. We have the same issue, loss of raw water flow. So, I'm guessing that means that the heat exchanger needs to be pulled out and cleaned at this point. And that's kind of a big job. So that sucks. That's a big bummer. Really big bummer. The only other possibility would be that the sensor is bad. I mean, that's the only other possibility. But kind of doubt that the sensor's bad. Well, a week has gone by. We're back at it with the generator here. I've been through so much on this thing. I'm really kind of a little bit perplexed. But here's what I've got in store for today. The water, raw water coming in, comes in from this tube down here at the bottom and comes out the top tube, comes down here, and then ends up down here. There's the heat exchanger. Do you see that little guy, that little nub thing sticking down with the 2 wires on it? That is the raw water sensor. It's actually a pressure sensor is what it is. And there's a lot of corrosion in there. I think what happened was I had a bad hose clamp and the water drained down on top of it and caused a mess. And so we've got a lot of corrosion there. I'm hoping that that sensor is bad. That's my thinking. So I've got a brand new sensor here. This is an actual original part. I'm really excited to throw this guy in, and hopefully this solves our problem. If not, I'm gonna have to pull that whole heat exchanger out, and honestly, there is no room in there. I hope I don't have to resort to that. That would just be absolutely nuts. I'm gonna try to swap this guy out first. We'll throw this guy in, we'll start up the generator and see how long it runs. I think last time, what was it, about 10 minutes or so, and then it shut down? So I got to thinking, I pulled this back out. I'm not really confident that this is going to seal well in there. It just kind of went to the end and stopped, and maybe it seals around this edge. Maybe. That's a big maybe. So what I'm going to do is throw a little bit of blue tape on here. I did look at the old one and I couldn't tell. There might have been some pipe dope or so whatever stuff that they put on these things. I couldn't really tell, but I'm just going to throw a little bit of blue tape on there just to make super certain that this thing doesn't leak. So let me go ahead and I'll put that on. We'll reinsert this guy, and I think we're going to be pretty close to ready to giving this thing a try.
A few moments later.
I don't see any leaks. I don't see any leaks in the hose. I don't see any leaks in our sensor. Little update here. Generator is still running. It's been, what would you say, Heidi, maybe 20 minutes or so?
I'd say 15 minutes at
15
least.
to 20 minutes, something like that. All right, Heidi, how you feeling about the generator?
Sounds great.
Yeah?
It does.
Okay. Do you want to call it? You're going to call it good?
I'm going to call it good.
Okay,
for
well,
sure.
I'm going to have you go over and shut it off at the panel then.
Okay.
All right. So,
Any particular thing before just hitting the stop button?
you just hit the stop button, push and hold until it stops. All right, that's it. You can let go of it,
Okay.
and that's it. So let's take a really good look at this. There's the rust and corrosion that I saw around the rim of this thing. Yeah, it's pretty bad, huh? And on the top of it as well, but mostly here. It's hard to see, but can you see in behind? See all the rust in there?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. This one was fine, but this one was bad. So
Right.
cleaning those connectors was a thing, and obviously that's where the rust was. This is not going back into ship stores as a known good. So something else I want to show you is take a look at this. So this is the water pump that I replaced.
Ew.
And this is the reason why I replaced the entire thing. Look at how rusted that thing is. And it's just terrible in there, right?
Well, it wasn't just that. It was, I think there was grooves at some point in it.
Sure, the pump itself, the pump housing
when
itself
you
is
were-
worn.
yeah.
This is a working unit. I will keep this in ship stores, but look at the rust. Look at all of that.
Snap.
So all of this rust and this corrosion here is all due to one bad hose clamp. And that's why it's so important to lay eyes on these things, grab hold of hose clamps that are on hoses, like especially raw water hoses. Give them a wiggle. All the stuff that's below the water line has 2 clamps on it. Well, even some of these, maybe the hose, the nozzle that it's going on to, little nipple is not wide enough for 2. Well, if it's not, that's great, but get underneath there, grab hold of it, pull on it a little bit, twist it a little bit. If it's gonna break, you want it to break in your hands, not sometime when you go to use it. And so that was it. I touched that clamp, it fell off, and all that water had been dripping down and going down to that sensor. And you've seen our fuel pump as well. It's very rusted. Now we do have a replacement fuel pump, and I might actually just throw that on at some point because, yeesh.
Join us next time when we get towed to Jeff's Catamarans to fix the rudder tube issue and another issue that cropped up on the port side. As always, thanks so much for watching. Safe travels. Bye.